Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I am Ross Morasso with my guest today, Laurie Greenberg, founder of Infinite Potential Coaching, LLC. You can find her at myinfinitepotential.com. She is a life coach, leadership coach, turn your life around coach, and just fundamental resident badass in Ann Arbor, Michigan. But you can contact her from pretty much anywhere in the world and engage her. We've had her on the show once before. I'm really excited to talk to her again. Hi, Laurie, and welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So we got the new year coming up. I would imagine that this becomes something like tax season for accountants, but for life coaches. What should people do in the new year? We got all these lofty ambitions and everything else. What's a trick or two or a step or two to make sure that it's going to stick in 2023?
Yeah, I would say tame those ambitions. Use the new year like we use time to reflect on birthdays or new months or new weeks, to really just reflect on the last year, see what you accomplished, what you feel good about, what you didn't feel good about, what you didn't get done. But then when we create these quote unquote resolutions or goals for the year, it's nice to get an intention set instead of goals that are set. What do you want to be this year? How do you want to show up? What do you want your vibe to be? And then just kind of focus on the goals that are going to add to that particular vibe or intention that you're setting. And what I always say is prioritize one at a time. You know, focus on one area of your life. Don't try to do everything from January 1st to the 10th, because by the 11th, you're going to be burnt out and you're not going to want to do it anymore. So focus on one at a time. And then just from a life coaching perspective, one of the biggest things that I find with my clients is they have a specific goal and they want to achieve it. Like hands down, they don't care how, when, where. They don't know why they have this goal. They just feel very strongly they need to reach it. And eventually they reach it and they're not fulfilled. They're not content. So I always back it up before we really strategize to the goal. Figure out why it's important to you. What is that going to do for your life? What's the motivation behind it? Is it self-motivated, or is it from the world, from the culture that tells us that this is what we should be doing? I think that's how you really get it to stick, is to really have that motivation and intention behind the goal versus just setting something and making yourself do it, forcing yourself to do it versus wanting to do it.
So saying I want to raise, like that would be a pretty incomplete goal in your mind then?
Well, first of all, I want to raise is really out of your control. So if you want to make more money, figuring out why you want to make more money and figuring out steps that are going to move you towards make more money. Do you feel like you're worth more at the particular job you have? Do you feel like you need a different kind of a job? You know, just saying I want to raise, it's step one. That's good to know, and figuring out why that's important to you, and then figuring out how are you going to demonstrate your value to ask for the raise, or to there's so many different ways to go about it. But yeah, I mean, it's good to know what you're interested in, what you want in life, and then dig into the reasons why and how to get it.
I like what you're saying, right? Because you say you don't have any control over getting a raise. So thinking along that line, like, because your boss is holding the purse strings. But then you go on to say, though, what is your value and things like that. And it sounds like that maybe you start to steer people into a place where maybe, no, it's not in their control, because until you have the username and password for their bank account, right? It's not in your control. However, but to be, cause or a part of the solution to be able to get your raise, still using this example. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Thanks for clarifying. We do always have control. We're always at choice. But like you said, figuring out which part of that equation we do have control of. We don't have control of his purse strings. We don't have control of what he's going to say or she's going to say, our boss. But we do have control of what we bring to the situation, right? We have control of how we're going to show our value, how we're going to go up and ask, how the relationship with our boss might be. Or maybe it's getting a raise by creating a new outlet for income. There's lots of ways to figure these things out? Or is it just that you feel like you're not getting paid equally? So that's why there's not general rules for getting certain things done. That's why it's hard to just kind of give a general blanket, but it's really important to start at the top, figure out which part of the equation we have control of, and then honing in on what can we do to make that happen.
Wow. So I can start with saying, I want more money. And then you might say something like, for what? Right. And then it's, oh, well, to pay my bills or to do whatever. But I can see this spiraling all the way into, I just don't feel respected at work. And if I got more
Right,
money, then maybe I would. Right.
right.
And then, so do you find sometimes that by the time you get to the bottom of that, they don't even care anymore about the raise per se? They're on to just new goals.
Well, that's the key. That's why I when I go on these journeys with my clients, the first few sessions that we have together is really clarifying their goals, really clarifying what it is that they really want. Because like you said, a lot of times by the time we figure out what they really want, it turns into something, it evolves into something totally different. And so that's the key, because if you just told me your goal and I said, okay, let's do it, let's lose 10 pounds, by the time we lose the 10 pounds, we're still not where we wanted to be in terms of our feelings, how we feel about ourselves, our contentment, our, feeling aligned or feeling purposeful. But if we stick with the first few sessions of figuring out exactly what you want and why you want it and the motivation behind it, then we can see, okay, now that we really know what you want, we've kind of challenged you in a bunch of ways. What are the obstacles in your way? What are the challenges in your way that we need to kind of work through? Is it self-sabotage, or are there certain certifications I need to get if I want to make that happen? So that's the second phase, is figuring out what challenges are in our way to losing weight, getting more money, asking for a raise, starting our own business, whatever. And then the last part of the journey is really setting up a strategy. Like, we know what you want. We're very clear on what you want. We know how you want to feel at the end. We know what the challenges are. And now let's really create the action steps to making it happen.
You, I could imagine that this could be for some people like an emotional roller coaster just at our phase one. Do you notice in your clients, like, should we expect when we interact with a life coach such as yourself that we might have gotten more than we had actually bargained for by going down these roads?
Totally. So one of the, I think I've told you before, I don't focus on a specific type of person or niche. It's really creating clarity for people, whether they be leaders, professionals, entrepreneurs. I do some college students, but like a lot of the why, when we start to dig and we don't know where we're going, I have no idea where we're going to end up. A lot of it comes from beliefs or thoughts that come from our childhood that we might get emotional about. I just recently spoke to a client who felt like he was hardwired to think negatively, like everything is, he sees the, cup half empty. To come to find out that he tells me his mom is like really, I call it, I think I've talked to you about the levels of energy, low level of energy, in the sense that everything is a catastrophe. Everything is, martyr, and I'm the victim. And so of course he has that look on life, because his primary caregiver, not that she wasn't a great caregiver, but she had that belief in the world and in life. And so she's not going to change. She's who she is at this point, but he wants to change. And you can, when you're aware of that, I think we've talked about the blinders. When you have the blinders that come off, you start to see things more clearly, and then you can shift your thoughts and realize why we're having that. So yeah, that can get emotional, very emotional.
So, as we start to wake up to the infinite potential that we think we are, or that we want to obtain, got our goals. And so using your example here, it sounds like sometimes we realize that, well, looks like there also might be some other people involved here, right? So is there a step in sort of leveling or centering out the relationships that are around you to ensure a clear path? Is that a component of getting to your goals?
Sometimes, I mean, really, I focus on the person themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
when I mentioned the mom who had, this is where a lot of his beliefs came from. We're not blaming her. We don't want her to change. We don't have to do anything with her. It's creating that awareness that it's not necessarily truth that everything, he's hardwired, that he sees things badly or negatively. But he can see where it came from and he can make the choice. It's awareness, then acceptance, then you can make a conscious choice. So once you are aware that, oh, that's not really in me, it's not from me, it could be from my upbringing, you can make a conscious choice to shift that belief system. And so we don't usually have to do anything with the other people. We have to kind of figure out how that's affecting us and what we want to do about how it's affecting us. Do we want to, embrace it? Do we want to agree with her? Or do we want to kind of like put our healthy boundaries around ourselves in those situations where we feel like we might be being pulled into a reason why something won't work, or some negativity, or some half glass full situations?
Okay, so you mentioned the word boundaries, and we do hear this often in the world, and I think, there's some people, there's that old joke that I love, which says there's two sorts of really good friends, those that bail you out of jail and those that can't because they're waking up the morning of with you in prison. So,
Haven't heard that one, but it's good.
okay, so it's in terms of boundaries and understanding what people can do for you and can never do for you, right? And so how critical is that to understand the role people around us are playing or might play with our goals?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, there are goals. We're ultimately responsible for what we get in life, right? I mean, that's what I really try to teach people or show people, is that you can point fingers of the reason why you're in a certain situation in jail in your example. But ultimately, we make our own choices. We're responsible for our decisions. And so, you know, if we have people that we feel like are negatively affecting us, then again, it's our choice to set boundaries and either keep them out or keep them at a healthy distance. This isn't necessarily the predominant block for a lot of people, but it can be a physical block. It can be a physical person that's really, draining your energy. You can kind of see that a lot of times. I mean, I would say more often than not, it's really our own blocks. It's our own inner sabotage or saboteur or gremlin that makes us believe we can't do something. So again, I'm not going back to the example I gave you. It's not his mom's fault that he's seeing things negatively. It's that some of the beliefs that he has and the gremlins in his head or the stories that he tells himself, it came from examples of of the situation he was living in. She's not doing anything intentional to him, but now that he's aware of it, he can change what he believes, what the stories that are coming into his head.
For those of us just joining us, I'm talking with Laurie Greenberg, the life and leadership coach. You can find her at myinfinitepotential.com. And so we're in the middle of a conversation about how, for lack of a better term, sometimes we are our own worst enemy.
That's
now,
right.
You mentioned some books that you love, and I always like to think that we don't find everything from a single source in the world. And one of the books that you've commented on is called You Are a Badass. And I mentioned that one first. We have the 4-Hour Work Week, which has been pretty famous the past few years, and then the Big Leap. With You Are a Badass, though, in terms of being our own worst enemy, which is my phrase, just to put it down, and I think it's a Jen Sincero, I think might be the author on that. Okay.
Yep.
Tell me why you like these books and how can we use these as like extra tools, like along with a leadership and life coach like yourself?
Yeah. I mean, Jen Sincero's You Are a Badass was one of the very first books I had read in coaching. And it's all about that. Her book is completely about how we create our blocks, or we, self-sabotage ourselves. And she really teaches you that, things aren't going to just change if you just keep blaming other people. And, everything we believe, everything we think and that we speak, it all can become into our reality. I mean, she talks about how, like, you think, oh, woo woo, manifesting doesn't really happen until you try it. And so she started to dip her toe into, I'm just going to start feeling like a badass. And so everything she did had that filter. If I was a badass, this is the car I'd want to drive. I'm going to see myself in this car. This is how I'm going to feel. And little by little, as you step into that badass persona, or that, you start to really believe in yourself and stop blaming your situation or your upbringing or other people in your life, if you really just kind of stop listening to those old stories in your head, you can start stepping into the person you want to become. So even if you don't think you're a badass, start to believe it, start to play with it. And so that was really powerful for me, where it was really just changing the thoughts, which change how you feel about yourself. And you eventually start to change your actions, and then different things come into your life. And, you know, you can't believe it until you do it. So it's like it's a really good how to start to step into the person you want to become.
You know, we hear the phrase "fake it till you make it," right?
Yep.
And it's almost a punchline sometimes. You know, that phrase goes back so long. But are you actually saying, though, that taken on in a constructive way, that sort of thinking, though, or it starts thinking like that actually makes the difference? I mean, not only is it not something that we should not be doing, but faking it till you make it is almost step one here.
A little bit. There's a lot. It's a lot deeper than just faking it till you're making it.
Okay.
It's believing it till you make it. So it's a process of not just like, you know, saying positive things and thinking it's a bunch of BS. It's actually like stepping into the beliefs, and it takes time and it takes energy, and it takes poking holes into those old stories. So, you know, I can say, oh, you're so good at that. And then my other part of my head says, no, you're not. You failed at this. You failed at this. You didn't get that job. You didn't get that job. We keep telling ourselves stories. And so it's about really hearing those stories, becoming aware of what the stories that we're telling ourselves, and shifting them. We call it reframing. So reframing it to say, you know, you didn't get that job because you were better than all the candidates, or you didn't get that job because there was a better one waiting around the corner. So it's like starting to tell yourself those positive stories. So it's not just faking it. It's authentically believing it. It's authentic. I always say there's infinite stories we can tell ourselves.
Yeah.
Of course, we're often hardwired or positioned to tell ourselves the negative ones. It's all because I wasn't good enough. It's all because, you know, this happened or that happened, or, you know, we tell ourselves these negative stories. We don't know the truth. So why not make one up that sounds a lot better and makes us feel a lot better? Because if you tell yourself a negative story, you start to feel like, yeah, I don't feel so good about myself because, you know, that person didn't even say hi to me at the store. So I tell myself that, and then I feel crappy. And then I just kind of walk out and get annoyed with that person. But then if I decide to tell myself the reason that person didn't say hello to me was because they didn't see me, I feel good. I walk out of the store with my head high, you know, so there's like just infinite stories we can tell ourselves. So it's about reframing a lot of the negative thoughts that we hear that came from wherever they came from. It's in our bag of our life, and recognizing them, and then changing the stories so that we don't just fake it, we believe it.
So these stories that we tell ourselves, like sometimes when you're working with your clients, or for any of us listening here, would you suggest then that probably a lot of us, most of us, or even all of us, have at least a few stories that could be, you know, ancient in our own mind, but are still impacting us even today?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of our biggest blocks. We have a lot of inner blocks, and we you know, I call those interpretations. So the stories we tell ourselves are the interpretations, and they're not necessarily true. They're 99% not true. Once in a while, they maybe are true, but 99% of the stories we tell ourselves are not true. And it doesn't matter whether they're true or not. The more important is that we change the story to support us, because the negative story is not serving us, but changing the story about how it can support us and serve us is going to be a lot more productive. And it's going to serve us to get us to where we want to go, unless we want to keep living where we're currently living, and we're not feeling as good as we possibly can. So I believe that we all have the power to step into the person that we want to become. And that's another one of my big tools, is having people learn how to feel their intuition, because our intuition is really powerful at guiding us to our own path and getting rid of all those stories. Those stories are just part of, you know, who we've become in this lifetime. But our soul has the real GPS, the real direction. And so the more that we can tap into that, the more clear our decisions become, and the easier it is for us to believe these real stories.
Okay, so now you're shifting gears here into the metaphysical component. how big of a role does that play in your coaching and then for all of us just in our lives?
So it's sort of a secret superpower that I use. I don't always start with it, which is
Hmm.
depending on who I'm coaching or working with. Some of my clients are business people that have never really delved into that metaphysical world. So I don't start off the bat. I stick with the strategy and about their goals and what they want to achieve. And then, secretly, I work with them a little bit deeper until we have a very good relationships. I work with a lot of my clients for a very long time, and they become a lot more open to that and understanding that what's deeper is helping to guide a lot of their decisions. When they step away, when they get to the higher levels of energy, they can see things like above the forest instead of inside the trees. So I would say it's always a tool I use, whether I'm open about it. It takes a little time for, I have to meet people wherever they are. So if people are comfortable with it, we go right there. If not, then we just kind of start with wherever they're comfortable. But yeah, it's a big part of how I work with my clients.
Okay, because now it's getting complicated, and maybe this is why we use life coaches here, right? Because if you're saying we have to first understand our stories that we've told ourselves, whatever they meant to us, or our interpretation of them, as you said, but our past experiences are also a big component of our intuition, aren't they? So it seems like at what point do we know when we should be trusting our intuition or when it's just kicking ourselves up to try to become our own enemy again?
It's a good question, but what I would correct is it's
Okay.
not our past experiences. Our intuition and our past experiences are not really connected. Our intuition is
Mm.
our inner guidance. It's really who we are at our core. That's who we are. Our past experiences may have been driven by our intuition. A lot of times when you're little, you do things less about what other people think until you get older and you hear all the cultural norms and practical things that you need to follow. But I would say your intuition is really just who you are at your core. And as we get older and we start to go on with life, we put those blinders on and we become a little more unconscious and we just live until we decide to take the time. And you've heard of people doing meditation and yoga or whatever helps people to center. That's when people center, that means they're centering to their core, and their core is who they really are. So all the decisions filtered through your core are going to be, the way of where you really want to go. Because if you're aligned with your core, you're going to feel like bliss, peace, happiness. But when you follow just the rules and regimens and stories from your past experiences or from other people's past experiences or your parent fears that they've had, you're going to get off track. So the way to stay on your track as closely as possible and not veer too far off is to stay aligned with your core. That's your intuition.
Okay, so they're both components, but they're mutually exclusive, basically. We have past
Yes.
experiences, which we can
Yes.
potentially rely upon, and
Yes.
then we have our intuition, which is the inner guidance. Now,
Correct.
I want to make sure I'm hearing this right. This is very fascinating for me. So when we talk about intuition, our intuition is, and feel free to correct me here, but our intuition is that sort of not moral compass, but sort of just center compass over who we are. So basically, someone could offer me $5 million a year to go build skyscrapers, but that is just not how I wanted to spend my life, right? So I'm just throwing out an example. And if what you're and trying to wrap my head around what you're saying about intuition, that's when my intuition would probably pop up and just start to be gnawing at me. And then we'd have like, well, it's a lot of money, but intuition keeps saying, this doesn't feel right, does it? Is that
It,
intuition, that part that
it,
just kind of makes it feel not right?
Exactly. And I love that you said there's something that gnaws at you. So people don't realize, but everybody has signs, physical signs in their body
Mm.
that tells them this is not good. I don't know what about it. It could be something that sounds like it's really good for the universe or for the world, but it just something doesn't feel right. maybe it's the people that you're going to be working with. Your body will tell you. Your body will also tell you if you're totally in flow. That's a great opportunity for you. Jump on it. Everything in your body lights up whenever you think about it. You get excited. I notice people's energy levels, like they get really high. They're really excited. Like you can tell I like coaching because I'm really excited about it. But if I start talking about something that doesn't interest me, it's like it's going to be really kind of a drag. So your body will tell you if you're on the right track. And that's one of the, again, part of the tools of getting people to tap into their intuition through coaching is that, well, how does that feel to you? It's not like, oh, it feels, people know this. Sometimes I'll say, where is it in your body? And they'll say, like, my back gets all tight. Well, that's a sign. There's no bad physical signs, but they are signs. And if we don't pay attention to them, we go off track. We make bad decisions, but we knew that they were bad decisions. But if we tune in and we feel like, yep, everything's aligned, it's really easy, it's flowing, everything's working, then we're on the right track. And nobody needs to tell us that if it's a good idea or bad idea. You don't have to ask anyone's opinion when you're aligned with your intuition. You'll know.
Okay, so we just have a few minutes left. Who do you coach? Who are you willing to take on, right? Who are you willing to take on as a client?
I truthfully coach anyone who is motivated and willing and open, like you said. You never know what's going to come up, to be coached. They have to be, interested and motivated for it. I currently work with like leaders, professionals, entrepreneurs. I have people that are in life transition. And most recently, I've started working with college students because I have a couple of my own and I happen to know a lot and word's gotten out. And so I've been working with them because college students are in a big life transition. So they're trying to find their path and find, what's the right next step. So I do a lot of work with them.
College students, you do.
College students. Yeah. It's like, it sounds funny, but life coaching for college students is kind of a new area where I'm finding that, people are hiring me to do the siblings because they're like, wow, that really helped. As my kid went from high school under my house, and all my rules, now they're on their own. And there's a lot to it. It's a big life transition. Or when they graduate, people will call me and say, can you talk to my senior in college? Because they really don't know what they're supposed to do. Or 10 years out of college, they want it's really anyone who's seeking clarity to find out how they can tap into their own intuition to know next. I don't give advice. I really don't. I don't care which direction they choose, but I help people find the clarity where they know, how when we know. So that's what I help people figure out. When you know, and you're on the right path, right, or you're not.
Yeah. The old, yeah, you do though. All right. So Laurie Greenberg, life and leadership coach, Infinite Potential Coaching. You can find her at myinfinitepotential.com, located in Ann Arbor, Michigan, but you can hit her up on the website, and you do coach remotely, right? People don't have to be local?
Absolutely.
Okay. So thank you very much. I do hope that I get to speak with you again. There is so much more that I think we can cover. It's very fascinating to talk to you as always. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, and Happy New Year to all of you. And thank you for listening. I am Ross Morasso. Until next time.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.